introduce Dr. Alan Hurlbert, is going to talk to us about spam, I think. There was the picture in the program, he doesn't even know that. And Alan entertained all of us here in the Brown Lab, and actually all of UNM for the 5 years I think we overlapped here in the early 2000s. And he's coming from UNC and is going to tell us some things about an icon. Alan.
Thanks, Melanie. And before so this shouldn't take too long because I know everybody's probably itching to get up and get some food. But just a quick logistical thing before I speak here. There's something to sign for Jim and Astrid if you haven't already signed it. It's out by the registration table, so after this talk, right on your way to lunch or after lunch or during a bathroom break, please stop by over there and sign that if you haven't already. Okay, so I was really, this wasn't my idea. Felisa thought that something of this order was called for, and so we thought we might take a look, sort of a big picture view of what is a fairly illustrious career. And I think it's fair to say that Jim is an icon in ecology and in many ways. And I guess one of the underlying questions to address here is whether it's possible to apply the tenets of a discipline very loosely to examine the career of the founder of said discipline. So we're going to just look at some exploratory analyses. These are fairly hot off the presses. And in the first sort of macroecological question we'll look at is productivity-diversity relations. And Jim's career is quite remarkable with respect to the diversity of organisms that he has studied and has researched and that his work touches on. If we just think about very broad taxonomic groups, we can think about the diversity of orders. Sorry. Just snap it on. Okay. Thank you, yes. It's all downhill from there. Well, so very briefly, if we think about Jim's research productivity as measured in the total pages of published output in a given year, and the diversity represented in that output. So every data point here is a year of Jim's career, and we see, of course, a positive relationship between this productivity and diversity, and it does appear to be a monotonic but decelerating function. So naturally, this requires a log transformation. And in fact, we find that a fairly good power function fit between the taxonomic richness represented in a given year and the productivity, that total output, and clearly there's some relationship here with respect to the number of taxa that can coexist in one's brain, and how much perhaps it's related to the resources they have to devote to all of these manuscript pages. This is just a similar relationship, but with a different measure of diversity. So now instead of taxonomic diversity, if we think about journal diversity, the number of journals, we get an even tighter relationship here. And actually I have no good or bad analogy for why that would be stronger. Of course, we recognize that with a lot of macroecological patterns, our independent variables are often correlated with each other in space and time. And so, for example, productivity, there's temporal autocorrelation, but it correlates with other variables as well. So, for example, this is in red the mean annual temperature of the United States through time, and you can see that both temperature and productivity seem to be increasing over this time series. Perhaps temperature actually is more of a causal variable in explaining some of these diversity patterns. Naturally, we want to plot 1 over temperature Kelvin, 1 over KT here, and we find a linear relationship. The slope is a bit steeper than we expected, and temperature doesn't seem to be doing quite as much as productivity for explaining these diversity patterns in this career. Okay, another set of macroecological patterns we can think about are size distribution patterns. So this is a size distribution of Jim's paper lengths. And of course, like many such distributions, we see a sort of hollow J curve. We have many small papers and fewer large papers, the largest being up in the ballpark of the mid-30s there. And actually, does anyone have any ideas? Or Jim, do you even know what your longest papers are? No idea. One of them's Brown and Nicoletto, which doesn't even really count because there's like 12 pages of appendices included in that. And then the other one is a recent paper with Mark Lomolino. But again, this distribution clearly calls for a log transformation, and we have a very nice log normal size distribution here. But this is looking at all of these papers across all of the years together, and really, if we want to think about within a single year, a single community of papers coexisting within that career. Again, each data point here is a year of Jim's career, and we have on the x-axis the mean page length of papers coming out in that year, and then the y-axis is the number of papers that were published in that year. And at first glance, this may look a little messy, but in fact, there are some very interesting biological constraints going on here. So first of all, we have a slope of -1 setting a hard upper boundary here, which implies that the total number of pages that you can produce in a year, at least in this part of the distribution, is fairly constant. You can produce few large papers or more smaller papers. But of course, this doesn't hold all the way to the end. We have this other constraint here. And I think there are two good reasons for this constraint. One, of course, is that all of these papers down in the 2 to 5 page length, those sorts of papers, these are the science papers and the nature papers. And in fact, the page length is, as published, is probably not a good reflection of the total amount of effort that went into those papers. You need to have airtight logic, you need to have all of your supplementary materials, etc. Secondarily, my sense is that some of the editors at Science and Nature start to get kind of pissy when you try to publish so many papers in Science and Nature such that your rejection rate may actually go up a little bit, and that may also contribute to the steepness of this constraint down here. You'll note we've got just only two outliers outside of this constraint space. But they're in adjacent years, 2003, 2004. We all know the stochasticity involved. You write a manuscript, but when it actually comes out, can go one way or the other. In fact, if we just pool the data for 2003 and 2004 and take the mean page length for those 2 years combined and look at the mean 12 papers per year, they fall very nicely inside that constraint space. Again, this is a constraint space, and so we can see these years, and I should have actually labeled which years these are. That probably would have been very informative. But the years that are close to those red constraint boundaries indicate sort of that maximal scientific productivity when Jim was really cranking, and those were probably the years he most transformed the field of ecology. By contrast, that implies that the rest of this stage, in most of Jim's career, in fact, he was really just coasting along, not putting out as much as he could have been. So I think that's it, but the basic answer to my question I was asking at the outset is yes, we can, through poorly applied metaphors and analogies, try to apply the tenets of a discipline to examine the professional output of the founder of said discipline. So thank you, Jim, for providing such a career to analyze. And actually, obviously, Jim has not coasted for most of his career. It's a very impressive career. And sorry, let me just get Safari up here really quick. Hello, Firefox. And I just encourage people, I know everyone feels like they have a pretty good sense of Jim's career, but I encourage you, if we just do a Google search of Jim Brown, ecology. So naturally, we could look at his website, but that's the biased perspective, right? So where's an unbiased?
I don't have Wi-Fi on right now.
They've got no Wi-Fi. Well, I encourage people to check out Wikipedia, which is a naturally unbiased source of information for a look at Jim's career. Let's see if we can do this really quick.
Can you put it on the doc cam? There you go.
Okay, wikipedia.org. So here we have James Brown, singer, songwriter, musician, recording artist, football player. He has many accolades. Education honors, of course. In 2003, I'd like to point out, among his many grants, he won a Sigma Xi grant and aid for $475, etc. I encourage you to check this out at your leisure. Of course, he had a significant role in the NFL, a very long singing and songwriting career, and of course, various very highly cited publications as well. So anyway, with that, I will switch us all to